Okay, yes. Thank you for reminding me. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So talking about barakah. Yeah, so basically, we know with the um, Wahhabi movement, there's this hypersensitivity to everything being shirk, right? So many of us have been raised like that. We've kind of heard on the minbar, directly or indirectly, like, oh, this is shirk and that's shirk. Sometimes it goes to huge extremes, like deferring to a scholar is a form of shirk because you're making him an authority other than Allah. Um, Having foreign laws is shirk because you're putting a law other than Allah's law in place. Um, and then part and parcel of this is the idea um, of barakah. So we spoke about this last week and um, how shirk began. So there's a difference between how shirk began versus how shirk does normally begin. So when we say something is haram because it leads to something, we mean it normally leads to something, right? So it is not true that for example, taking barakah from things normally is a shirk. That's number one. Number two, fundamental concept of a ta'thir, of causation. Who causes what? Right? So we spoke about this last week and we mentioned it again, that when you believe that, for example, this piece of cloth from this mushaf in itself um, in itself benefits or harms, then that is shirk. When you believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has invested power in it, independent power, something that happens independent of Allah, but Allah invested it with that power, that is considered bid'ah. It's considered a innovation, as part of the innovation of the Mu'tazila. If you believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes things happen and the location, the locus, the occasion, the site, the approximate cause, the ostensible cause is X or Y or this thing or that thing, then this is Iman, right? This is Tawheed. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah means what? Allah is the one who makes things happen. People don't make things happen, right? So the Mu'tazila, for example, they said, we make things happen. They said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invests in us power, okay, invests power into us and gives us free will. So we independently make things happen. That's why we do good or bad independently of Allah. Allah does not make us do good or bad. We as Ahl Sunnah, we do not believe that. We do not believe that we have independent power. We do not believe that anybody has independent power. The Kaaba doesn't have independent power. Your dua doesn't have independent power. The barakah of the mushaf, the barakah of this, the barakah of that. None of these things have independent power. They are really the how of what happens, not the why of what happens. How was this person cured? He picked up the mushaf and held it to his eyes, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cured him, right? So the mushaf did not cure him. The barakah of the mushaf, the barakah of the kiswa of the Kaaba, the barakah of someone's dua, the barakah of someone's presence, the barakah of Ramadan does not make things happen, right? It does not have independent power. It is not totally independent, nor is it semi-autonomous, nor is it semi-independent. So that's what the Mu'tazila said. They said there isn't another power besides Allah, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invests his power in people. That's how they do things. So that's how the Mu'tazila view things. So when you start to look at barakah like that, the Kaaba, the Mus'haf, the barakah of the Sheikh, the sohbah of this person, the time, this place, in itself does things that become shirk. As semi or somewhat autonomous, that's also wrong. It's not shirk, but it's also wrong. But rather we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the direct cause of every single effect. And he does things with a means, with a place, with an outward cause, or with no cause. Right? The rabbits decrease in number because of the increase in foxes, or the rabbits decrease in number without the increase of foxes. the one object moved towards the other object because of a how, not why, because of gravitational pull, and it moves towards the other object without gravitational pull. So the gravitational pull is not the cause, it is the description of what is happening and the how it's happening, not the why it's happening. So in philosophy call this occasionalism. Occasionalism, that causes are not causes, they are occasions. Allah is the cause, right? Allahu qayyum samawati wal ard. Allah is the one he is an as-samad. The samad means everything goes back to him. Okay, so this is this concept. So then you come along and say, well, it's shirk to take barakah from this, shirk to take barakah. Look at these people, they have all these these things. It's not true at all, right? So if you look at the Salaf, it's very, very clear that they took barakah from things and they gave barakah to things. So for example, look at how the Sahaba were with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, taking barakah from his sweat, taking barakah from his presence, taking barakah from his hair, the process of handing out his hair to people, right? Barakah from his saliva, barakah from his hands, from everything, right? So we say that's unique to the Prophet ﷺ. That's not true, right? It's not unique to the Prophet ﷺ. Imam Shafi'i gave somebody a shirt and says, he said, give this shirt to Imam Ahmad to wear and give it back to me. Right? This comes in Sira al-Nubala by Imam al-Dhahabi. Right? And it talks about the so Sir in mentions that Imam Shafi gave a shirt to Imam Ahmad to wear and had it sent back so that Imam Shafi could take the barakah of the shirt. I think he used to wash it in water and then drink the water. Right? So it's taking barakah from another sheikh, from person. Barakah of a place. I believe it's Ibn Fawrak, I think it is. Or maybe somebody else. Imam al-Dhahimi mentions that making dua at so-and-so's grave is al-iksir al-mujarrab, right? It is the proven elixir of du'as. Like if you want your dua to answer, go to this grave of this person and make dua. Are you worshipping that person? No, because of the barakah of that person. The person is beloved to Allah, that place is beloved to Allah, and so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers du'as there. They themselves do not have power to help you or harm you, but the barakah of the place is rife. If you look this in the Salaf, it's very, very common, right? So barakah of places, barakah of people. In one place, Imam al-Dhahabi mentions that about barakah, and he says that in contradistinction to people of bid'ah, this is totally fine. And so, i.e., he's talking about people of his time. This is not a Wahhabi movement. Imam al-Dhahabi is ages ago, right? Student of Ibn Taymiyyah, right? Imam al-Dhahabi very, very long time ago, and he's saying, people like the Mu'tazila don't believe in barakah and they don't believe in miracles. So notice it's very important that history, not understanding history is a huge problem, right? It's a huge problem. And so when people say things on the minbar today, it's already been said. The discussion's already been happened. The issue of causation and what causes what and how these things, we've already discussed it. But then so somebody comes along and says this is shirk or that's shirk. We've already defined these things. We've already had very refined and lengthy discussions about things. And people are just ignorant about that. Right? So the issue of shirk and no shirk, we've already discussed that with the Mu'tazila. The Mu'tazila, they claimed that we are semi-autonomous, and we said, no, we're not. We've already discussed that. Imam Bukhari already wrote his essay on Khalqullah Af'al al-Ibad, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates our actions, right? So we already know that. So when you say, oh, it's shirk to believe the dua helps people, it's shirk to believe that in the barakah of something, we've already discussed it and we already know what's going on. We already have a precedent from the Salaf on these issues. So we don't need to come along and say this is shirk and that's shirk. We just need to actually learn what the Salaf and what the ulama have said. Right? Does that make sense, inshallah? Mikhail, Nasir, and Yusuf, you guys, I don't know when you joined, but does that make sense?
Yes, for me.
Right. And so again, before the Salafi movement, we find this in our books of Aqidah. Shaykh Ahmed Dardir, he says, ومن يقول بالطبع أو بالعلة فذاك كفر عند أهل منا ومن يقول بالقوة المودعة فذاك بدعي فلا تلتفتي. Right, this is in the textbook in Aqidah by Ahmed Dardir, who was Sheikh al-Azhar, I don't know, maybe 300 years ago, maybe less than that. He said, whoever says things are the things cause other things, or they do it through their very nature. فَذَاكَ كُفْرٌ عِنْدَ أَهْلِ مِلَّةِ. That's kufr, right? Fire burns by its very nature, independently of Allah. Mass attracts mass by its very nature, independently of Allah. This is kufr. وَمَنْ يَقُلْ بِالْقُوَّةِ الْمُودَعَةِ. Whoever believes in invested power, that Allah has invested power. Like Allah is the one who makes miracles happen, but He invests the power of miracles in a prophet or in a righteous person, right? Or He invests it in, I don't know, or something. فَذَاكَ بِدْعِيٌّ فَلَا تَلْتَفِتِ. The person of bid'ah, right? So ta'thir, causation, making X happen, is something that is of the unique to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is the only one who makes things happen. Right? That's the la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Right? This is the hadith al-af'al, right? That Allah is the one who makes things happen. Khair, inshallah. Makes sense? Inshallah, any questions on that? Thank you, Muhammad Shumad, for reminding me. Exactly. Correlation and not causation, correct. So Hadi, if we get to let's go to something to get something more fundamental, right? If you can imagine the discussion you have with a science teacher, okay? So correlation in biology, right, is very common, right? So like we don't actually know half the time what's happening in medicine. We don't really know what's going on from a fundamental level. A lot of things are kind of like fairly indirect, right? So now we put biology to the side and medicine to the side. We start looking at chemistry and physics, right? So you say, Farid, does fire burn by its very nature? And I say, no. He says, Farid, you don't know what we're talking about. I say, why? He says, Farid, what is fire? And I'm like, I don't know. He says, fire is an exothermic reaction, right? Obviously, it's originally endothermic. You have to heat things up in order to start them burning, but they are exothermic, right? Stop me, guys, if you don't understand what I'm saying, right? Exothermic, meaning it emits heat. And I say, yeah, but it doesn't have to. And then the science teacher says, no, Farid, it does have to. I say, why? Because what's happening in an exothermic reaction is the reaction there's a new chemical bond which has a lower energy level. There's a lower energy level. So you have oxygen by itself, carbon or hydrogen by itself. Now you burn carbon and oxygen, or you burn hydrogen and oxygen, and you get H2O or CO2. This new bond has a lower energy level in it. And I say, yeah. So then the science teacher says, well, Fried, where's the other side? Where's the other energy going to go? And I'm like, oh, good point. Good point. So it has to come out as light, it has to come out of motion, something like that. Your energy can neither be created nor destroyed, right? So now the science teacher or this person is saying, look, logically, not just scientifically, logically, fire has to burn, right? When you have this kind of reaction, it will emit some kind of energy, be it light energy, be it heat energy, be it something else. Okay. So I say, good point. So now you say, Fried, what's your rebuttal then? So I said, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Is that correct? Yeah. 100%. Okay, where's the universe come from then? So what I'm saying, what we say, is could Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala simply subtract energy from something? Yeah. Right? So it is not by its nature, right? It is not by its nature that energy can either be created or destroyed. It is by norm. It is the norm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala usually lets things work in the universe, is that energy can either be created or destroyed. That's the norm, right? We learn talking about energy transfer in science. We talk about, right? The ball fell. It was gravitational potential energy shifting to kinetic energy, right? That's what's happening. That's how it works. But that's not its nature. That's just how Allah usually makes things work. And that's very important to us, of course. That's how we live life. There's many, many things about it, but it is not logically the case. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could make carbon react with oxygen and have a lower energy level and not emit any heat. Why not? Right? Allah can do that. It's not a problem. Right? Here is the moon, here is the sun. I'm like, look, the beautiful signs of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He made the sun and the moon in perfect direction. No, it's just science, Habibi, right? This is the mass of the sun, this is the mass of the moon, this is the mass of the earth. It's gonna be in this place, right? There's no Allah in the picture, right? It's just basically gravity and all that stuff, whatever. And say, no, gravity doesn't necessarily have to, so when you say mass attracts mass, that is a description that is not or correlation, right? It is not an explanation. You didn't explain why, you explained what is happening or how is it happening, not why is it happening, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that Allah makes it happen, and these are the sunnah of Allah, right? Hadi, right? How Allah usually makes it happen, but it's not actual reality, right? As opposed to, well, what about mathematical facts? Are they also just norms? And say, no, that's not true, right? So mathematical norms are logical norms, so they don't change. So if you have a thing, right? Exactly. So if we continue to follow the veins question and we always continue to ask why, where do we end up? With Allah. Allahu Samad. Right? Qul huwa Allahu Ahad, Allahu Samad. Right? He is the why of all whys. Right? Subhanalladhi yastanidu ilayhi kullu shay wa la yastanidu ila shay. Right? Everything goes back to him, but he doesn't go back to anything. Everything is a reaction, but he's the action. He does not react to us. He doesn't like, oh my God, Mikhail made Toba. Oh, you know what? I'm going to accept his. You know what? Angels, come on, guys. Take him out of hell. He's done a good job, right? It's not like Allah doesn't react. Like, oh man, Mikhail, this ain't haram. Okay, guys, take away his good deeds. It's not like that. It doesn't work. Allah doesn't react. He's not in time. It doesn't react to us. We react to Allah. Allah acts and we react. He is the cause of all effects directly. Directly. Kun fayakun. Right? Everything else is just, you know, sound effects and graphics. It's not real. Right? Good deeds do not increase your iman. Allah increases your iman. But He asks you to usually do it in the normal way, which is do good deeds. So usually you do good deeds, your iman increases. You do bad deeds, your iman decreases. Allah can make the opposite happen, right? Allah can make the opposite happen. So that's why we do good deeds, but we don't rely on our good deeds, right? And we don't do bad deeds, but when we do bad deeds, we don't despair because your bad deeds don't send you to hell. Allah sends you to hell, right? So it's a very important philosophical, theological, and then emotional thing. Like who's the one thing in my life? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, makes sense? Yeah?
Yes, sure.
Fantastic.
Sheikh, I had a question regarding like you mentioned like the Wahhabi movement.
Mm-hmm.
What was the I guess like the reaction in terms of like what was the reaction of the Wahhabi movement to like was there actual like
Yeah,
widespread
Yeah, there's widespread ignorance and widespread. So what you're going to see basically, if you want to understand the Wahhabi movement, go to Pakistan. Do you have anybody here from Pakistan? Nobody? I mean, Hadi, I guess you got some connections there, but right, Sara, you been to Pakistan? So you go to Pakistan. So for example, go to the place. I'm going to pause the recording for a second. I don't want to say it's talking about specifics. So that's one example. Another example is uh, what's his name? Uh, Sha'rani, I believe it is. Sha'rani. Al-Uhud al-Muhammadiyya. I believe it's Sha'rani. So he has a book called Al-Uhud al-Muhammadiyya. What is the context of the book? The context of the book is people are overemphasizing the concept of bay'atu shuyukh. Like, oh, this is my sheikh and this is your sheikh, and my sheikh gave me this word and my sheikh gave me that word. He's like, what is the point of a pir? What is the point of a sheikh? The point of the pir, the point of the sheikh, is to help you follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So your ahad, your bay'ah, your promise is not to the sheikh, is to whom? To the Prophet ﷺ. So he wrote this book and he basically reoriented things. He said, of the uhud al-Muhammadiyah, of the pacts that every single Muslim has with the Prophet ﷺ, is that we do this or do this and go through various commands the Prophet ﷺ gave us to do of halal, of obligations and sunnahs, right? And then he says, and by the way, the sheikh is there to help you do that. So he's reorienting something that's off. There's a system that's off and you reorient it. That's one thing, as opposed to labeling people as kuffar. That's something else, right? Labeling people as kuffar is something else, right? So that's a very two different things. Okay, and so they're reacting to a real problem, but it's an overreaction to it. It's an overreaction to it. Now, why did that reaction kick off? Okay, because things were very off, A, and also there was foreign funding, right? Who do you think would be interested in funding the Wahhabi movement? We want to get rid of the Ottoman Empire.
The British.
The British. I can't say the brown British. You got to say it in another nicer way. You say the people to the north of France, right? I'm here, bro. It's like, no, I'm joking. No jokes, right? Joke like this, like document, and this is documented, right? Documented that the British funded it, right? It's documented, so it exists, right? So I'm not gonna be like, I'm not sure, Yusuf, you know better than me. Um, but extremists exists, right? But the thing is, somebody comes in and lights the fire, facilitate. There's somebody who wants to do something, but you come in and facilitate it. An idea already exists, a criticism already exists, frustrations already exist, but you come in and light the fire, right? So this is what's happened, right? This is what's happened. So it is a real legitimate problem. The default, if somebody says Sheikh, I'm like Sheikh of Tariqah. Someone says, I want to be in a Tariqah, I would say no. They say, go, they talk about this pir and that pir. The default, all of this is a load of nonsense. Like, should I do this weird Sheikh gave you? No, don't do it. That's the default. Because the default with Tasawwuf, with Sufis, when you say Sufi or Pir or Sufi Sheikh, the default is it's whack. It's crazy. That's the default, right? That is the default. It has been the default in the past, and it remains the default, right? And so that's how it is. So they're reacting to a real problem, right? A real problem. And something it's like you see it in Egypt. Palestine's less, right? But it's become less, but still a thing in Egypt, and it's a social problem, right? It's like a backwardness that exists in many Muslim worlds. And so they're correcting it, but you're overcorrecting it in a way it's not legitimate. Does that make sense, Mohammed?
Yeah, that makes sense, Sheikh.
And so
In terms of,
what's it's just a key difference when you say Salafi versus Wahhabi. So Wahhabi originally did not talk about fiqh. So the Wahhabis originally are Hanbalis, right? And there's a whole there were accusations that Muhammad ibn Wahhab was against following the form of Dhahib, and he wrote against. I said, I never said that, and they're Hanbalis. Whereas the Salafi movement is Wahhabism plus forget the form of Dhahib as well, right? And that comes with other, there's other reasons for it as well. It comes from other reasons. So in reality, let's see, in Egypt, one of the things pro-Salafism was make the deen more relevant and make the deen more flexible. So we often see with Salafis that sometimes they're more flexible, sometimes they're super strict, right? But initially, the some initial movements, particularly in Egypt, were to make the deen like basically the four madhabs are too strict. We need to make it a bit easier. There's because there are certain issues that are agreed upon, but there's really it's not the evidence isn't categorical, and so we can consider other opinions as opposed to becoming non-pluralistic, which is the default setting with a Salafi. You're non-pluralistic. There's only one opinion, and it's my opinion. And you're by default very strict as opposed to being more lenient. Allahu Alam. But there are genuine issues, right? If you talk to somebody, let's say Indo-Pak, I like Deobandis a lot, but there's issues with like very narrow ways of thinking of certain four madhab people, and that pushes people away. There are problems. So the key concept in life is when people are upset with something, there is a problem, just their reaction is wrong, right? There's a key concept. I mentioned this many, many times, right? So, for example, as men, right? You're talking to your wife and your wife's freaked out about something. And you're like, excuse me, that's an illogical reaction, right? So the point is recognize what she's objecting to, right? Recognize she's objecting to something. There is a genuine problem. What she said or how she reacted might not be the right way to do it. But there is a problem, right? Your teenager hates school. There is a problem with school. Like school is not a good place, and it is a genuine waste of time half the time. But now the reaction is, I'm never going to go to school. I'm leaving, right? The reaction is wrong. So there's a genuine problem. Go and see it, see the issues, and you're like, yeah, that's a problem. That's messed up, right? Afghan community. I prefer to be a Salafi Afghan than a whatever they have in Afghanistan because that's crazy, right? The deen, generally, the default deen in Afghanistan for most people in their minds is off. It's really weird. Like it's a really like so it's better in if you met some kind of oh yeah, I'm Salafi, it's like they're probably going to be more balanced, closer to actual Islam than the way that they see things because it's kind of like it's just crazy, like insane tribalism mixed with I don't know what, like there's no knowledge, right? So there is a problem, but how do we solve it? Solve it in another way, right? And not in the way that they do things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, Sheikh. And just a follow up. So, in terms of like realigning versus an overreaction, is there room in fiqh in terms of sadd al-dhara'i to for like a mufti of a certain locality to make like visiting the graves haram?
Yeah,
Because
100%. Yeah,
Mhm.
100%. Just like ikhtilat, mixing between the genders is not haram in itself. But in this context, that context, these people, those people, yeah, right. Same thing. So somebody's come along and say, don't do it. 100%. You know, so the Sayyidina Umar did lots of those things. Lots of those things. This is in principle halal, but don't do it. I believe there was one Sahabi, he was praying after Asr in a masjid. And Sayyidina Umar saw him. He says, what are you doing? He's like, oh, the Prophet sometimes prayed after Asr. And he says, yeah, I know that and you know that, but they don't know that. Meaning, there are certain situations where you could pray after Asr, for example, Qada prayer. But here are the hoi polloi, the average guy of the Tabi'een, he saw Sahabi X praying after Asr. So now he thinks it's halal. So now he's going to pray all these sunnahs after Asr. He can't do that, right? So you need to be careful. Like what you're doing is totally fine. In fact, could be sunnah, but it will lead to the haram. So be careful. Yeah, 100%. Confuse people, so all sorts of issues, or not even not following a madhab, right? A new Muslim, so now you just took a shahada. Okay, now can you sign here that you're going to be Hanafi for the rest of your life? Like, what are you talking about? I'm just like confused, right? So yes, it is true If they don't follow a madhab in this minute right now, in principle, it could lead to fiqh issues. But that's a stupid thing to do. It's like just leave it as it is. There's more harm than benefit. So just leave it as it is. And if they never even end up praying at all, right? That's where they're going to be. As far as they ever got was the shahada, and that's it. Alhamdulillah. So 100% taking people as they are, looking at the situation as it is, knowing what would happen if you did this, that 100%. But the issue is now labeling it as shirk, right? Min bab sadd al to block the means to the haram, I'm going to label it as shirk. That's extreme now. You don't need to do that. Okay? We're kind of getting off, inshallah, makes sense, inshallah. Wait, okay. Okie dokie. So we did this. So Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim said they worship idols and adopted the same errors as the people before them, yet they retained and held fast practices going back to the time of Abraham. So they identified themselves as people who are following the way of Ibrahim, such as honoring the temple, going around it, the tawaf, the great and little pilgrimage, Umrah and Hajj, the standing at Arafat and Muzdalifah, sacrificing the victims, meaning sacrifice animals, right? The pilgrim cry, right? So every single tribe had their own talbiyah. Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. Labbaik la sharika lak labbaik. And then they would add. So each tribe would come, labbaik Allah, right? Ever at your service, ever at your service. You have no partner. And then accept. And then they would add their own God. So each tribe, so that we have documented, right? This is in as a book, you can read it. Kitab Al-Azmina wal-Talabi by Al-Qutrub. This is a student of Sibawayh. He has a small book on times of the year. What do you call this time of the year? What do you call that time of the year? What do you call the end of spring? What do you call the beginning of spring? What's a word that goes with the first day of spring? All these different words. And then he goes through because of the times of the year. Obviously, there's the Hajj. What was the talbiyah of each tribe? They would come and they would say, "There's no Allah. You have no partner except this partner, who will be a demigod or a semigod." So basically, what's it called? إلا شريكا هو لك تملكه وما ملك. Like he has a sharik, you have a sharik apart from, but there's a sharik that you're in control of. So basically, our God is not competing with Allah. It's like a demigod, right? If that makes sense, right? So you have like Zeus. Everybody's going to worship Zeus at the Olympics, but then maybe in this town they worship Hera, or in that town they worship whatever it is, Hermes or whatever, you know? So you have your little demigods, and then you have the major god, right? So, but it's a pantheon now. It's a pantheon, right? A group of gods. Okay, so thus Kinana and Quraysh used the pilgrim cry, "At thy service, O God, at thy service, without an associate, but the associate thou hast, thou ownest him and what he owns," right? إلا شريكا هو لك تملكه وما ملك, right? And they have various different ones. They used to acknowledge his unity in their cry and then include their idols with God, putting the ownership of them in Allah's hand. God said to Muhammad, most of them do not believe in God without associating others with him, i.e., they do not acknowledge my oneness without knowing of my reality, but they associate with me one of my creatures. The people of Noah had images or idols to which they were devoted. God told his apostle about them and said, quote in the Quran, and they said, "Forsake not your gods, forsake not Wood and Suwa' and Yaghouth and Ya'uq and Nasr," right? And they had led many astray. Among those who had chosen those idols and used their names as compounds when they forsook the religion of Ismail for Ishmaelites and others was Hudayl ibn Mudrika ibn Ilyas ibn Mudar. They adopted Suwa' and they had him in Ruhat. I don't know what Arabic is here. Ruhat or Ruhat. I'm not sure. So that was one tribe. So they had basically pre-Abrahamic gods. Kalb ibn Wabra of Qudaa, who adopted Al-Wud in Dumyat al-Jandal. Dumat al-Jandal. So it mentions here, we forsook Allat and Uzza and Wud. We stripped off their necklaces and earrings. Right. So Wud was also there. An-Na'am of Ta'i, the people of Jurash and Madhij, right? That's a name in Yemen right now. Adopted Yaruth in Jurash. Khaywan, a clan of Hamdan, adopted Ya'uq in the land of Hamdan in Yemen. Dhul Kala of Himyar adopted Nasr in the Himyar country. Khawlan had an idol called Ammanas in the Khawlan country. According to their own account, they used to divide their crops and cattle between it and Allah. So basically sacrificing some cattle to Allah and some to that God. If any of Allah's portion, which they had earmarked for him, came into Ammanas's portion, they left it to him. But if any of Ammanas's portion was in Allah's portion, they returned it. They are a clan of Khawlan called Al-Adim. Some say that it was concerning them that God revealed. They assign to Allah the crops and cattle he has created a portion. And they say this is Allah's in their assertion, and this is for our partners. And subhanAllah, this whole thing about, offering. I remember when I was at school, my assembly, we would gather in a kind of big room was in a church, right? There's a church right next to my school. And uh, this whole thing about offering, plants. So they'd have in autumn, you would see for about a month, you see all these pumpkins and autumn fruits in the church, just almost like an offering, right? This probably pagan remnants of how things used to be, right? Allahu A'lam. This is what their partners, thus, what is for their partners does not reach Allah, and what is for Allah goes to their partners. Evil is their judgment, right? So this is how they function. Give me a second, please. Okie dokie. I kind of have to finish here. Right. So the Bani Milkan of Ibn Kinana, Ibn Khuzaymah, Mudar had an image called Sa'd, a lofty rock in the desert plain in their country. They have a story, etc. We'll come to that, inshallah. So my apologies, I have to run. Inshallah, stop here.
No, Jazakallah khair,
So
Sheikh.
just quick question here from Nasir. Can I answer it publicly, Nasir?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. So it says, how would you advise someone who has extreme tribalism someone who has, I honestly don't know. So one of my problems is I'm like totally untribal, right? Like I don't have any affiliation to any country whatsoever. I have 3 passports and I don't identify as English. I think I probably identify as American more than English, but I'm not American. I live in Malaysia. I'm half Swiss, but don't really spend any time in Switzerland. I'm English, but don't support any football team. I'm white, but I'm Muslim, so it's very difficult for me to even understand that, right? It's quite difficult. So you kind of have to tread carefully and deal from where they are. So talk about how Islam encourages certain things in tribalism, the family, this and this, but then you make them align with Islam as opposed to tribalism itself. But it is a problem, right? And it is a form of shirk. Like it's not actual shirk, right? But it is a form of shirk, right? With these proper patans, it gets extreme. It's like there's what's it called? There's a Sharia and above it, what's it called? It's called what's the law called? There's a word for it in Pashto they have for it. It's called something like their tribal laws are above the Sharia, which is on the brink of kufr, right? So kufr will be, I honestly believe that tribal laws should be observed morally over Sharia, which is kufr. But as opposed to, hey, I just want to do that, I just want to disobey the Sharia. But it's called has a word for it. But anyway, yeah. So just basically try and talk to them from where they are. Same thing. You talk to a redneck. I understand where you're coming from. Why are there a bunch of brown people here? Isn't it annoying, messing your country up, right? They have a point, right? But it's wrong. The reaction is wrong. Like being racist is not a good way to do things, or the actual problem is not what they think it is. So you have to kind of empathize from where they are and come from where they are to halfway to where they should be. Wallahu alam. Inshallah, I'll stop here. Inshallah, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. But everyone's like that. Everyone's like that. Everyone has a tribe in one way or the other.